Well, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you again. Welcome to Fanning the Flame podcast. This week, we've got Benj Lyon, who is based down at the Leamington Spa Church, part of Living Rock Church. He's a designer, he's a church plant leader, and he is a marathon runner. So,
yes,
look, it's great to have you. Welcome, Benj.
thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Brilliant. Looking forward to hearing what you've got to tell us tonight. Look, what this podcast is all about, exploring everyday stories about how God speaks to and uses everyday people in everyday situations to fulfill his eternal purposes. I'm particularly interested in how God speaks and directs people, how he fans that flame to find hope and purpose and provides answers to everyday situations. I just know that we're going to be dead excited to hear from Benj today. He's going to be really inspiring, I know. Benj, from when he was just a 10-year-old, he's not 10 now, as you can see. He didn't have a beard when we first met. But look, Benj, it's really good to see you. And I know you're excited to answer all of our amazingly simple questions. And we'll start with some really nice quick fire questions, just to get to know you a little bit before we get really into the detail. So Benj, tell us a little, welcome. Really good to see you. And thanks for doing the podcast with us. Tell us a little bit about you. I don't know, age, date of birth, siblings, whatever. However you want to describe yourself in that first bit then, Benj.
Sure. Well, I chuckled at the intro because I say I'm a marathoner. I have done a marathon, but just one so far. But I'm going to claim it. I'm a marathoner. So yeah, I'm 35. I'm born and bred in Leicester or Leicestershire. Grew up just sort of south of Leicester. I went to Manchester for university.
Greatest city in the world.
Came back. Well, that's what they say.
I was born there, Benj, so I know it must be the greatest city.
Of course. And when I went, everybody said, "You must know Stu Wright." Yes, came back down this way after uni. I worked in Birmingham for a couple of years and then been working for the church for the last 10 or 11 years. Married to a wonderful woman called Kim. And we live in Leamington Spa now. We've just moved last year to plant a church here. And we've got two rather young children who are keeping us busy. They're definitely keeping us busy, and they're keeping the bags under our eyes is probably what I'd say.
Well, I suppose at this time you've left putting them to bed to your lovely wife, so you could do this for us.
I did. I managed to. Thank you for that, by the way.
It's okay, any time. Just interested, obviously, having been in the greatest city in the world. What did you study at uni?
So I wasn't going to go to Manchester originally, so I finished school and I applied for 5 different places, and I didn't quite get the results that I wanted, or didn't quite get the places that I wanted, I should say. And nothing quite felt right, so chose to take a year off. And I was one of the very few that did back in the day. I think it's more common now to even not to go to uni or to just take a bit of time off, but it was less common back then. So I took a year off, considered my options, and then reapplied, which was definitely the right thing to do. I think God was in it all, and then got a place in Manchester, unconditional offer, fantastic city to be in, great church. And I studied digital media and communication.
Wow. I don't feel under any pressure of doing this podcast then, Benj. That's brilliant. So you were telling me a little bit in your intro there that have you got brothers? And did you say you had brothers?
I do, yeah. 2 younger brothers.
So you're having to lead the way all the time.
That is I'd say the blessing and the curse. It's not a curse, but it's the pros and cons of being the oldest sibling is you get to do everything first, but it also means you have to do everything first.
Yeah, no, exactly. Cool. You talked a little bit about some of the jobs you had, and obviously you've been in the one that you've been in the longest. Tell us a little bit about what one of your best jobs or the current job.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would say my current job is the best job I've ever had, to be honest. I think when I was growing up, I wanted to be an architect, and then I wanted to be a graphic designer, and then I wanted to be a filmmaker, a photographer, kind of all different things in the creative space.
Yeah.
And then when I went to uni, I kind of pivoted and went into web design actually. So that's what I did straight after uni. But kind of doing that for a few years, I felt it was relatively kind of narrow in terms of
Mm,
all of the different interests that I had. And in the background, I was kind of, I'd say I've grown up in the era of digital media and the internet and technology and social media. All of those things have appeared kind of in my lifetime. So I remember the day when I got my first iPhone, switching from a little clickety click old phone to an iPhone, and how much that changed the world, and then social media coming along. And so I remember all of these things, and I remember for the longest time having this feeling of, wouldn't it be so great if the church with a big C was at the forefront of all of this innovation and creativity, and really knew how to use some of these things to further the gospel and to preach the message that the church was carrying. And at the time, most churches were so behind. They really, really were, and not presenting things in a way that the world wanted to see.
mm,
And so I kind of had this dissatisfaction for a long time, and I kind of always thought to myself, if I ever get a chance to work for the church, that would be amazing, because that would really create a bit of space for me to try and do that. And that's what's happened for the last 10 years. Yeah, I came on board at church in 2015. Saw us through the pandemic, which was another big shift in everything that we did in terms of using
yeah,
technology and media. And now again, we're in the age of AI, and another big change in how social media is used, particularly. And now at the start of what's been called the quiet revival, with a lot of Gen Z and Gen Alpha kids coming to find church. It's a really interesting time. So I feel privileged to be able to do it, if I'm honest, and it's been the best job ever, because what more could you want than to use your gifts and abilities to do something that God wants to use you in?
absolutely. We'll explore that a little bit more in a bit. Is there a particular person that's you admire and inspired you, either from a work sense or just in general?
Yeah, so this was a tricky question, but I've written the first thing that came to my head, which was my dad, which might sound a bit sort of cheesy and corny, but it's true. And I think he probably, without a doubt, is probably the person that inspires me the most, or that I admire the most. Somebody who had a very good job, and then he gave it all up because God called him to do something for church. And he's done it ever since, and he's given everything to it, and he's never let it go. He's always pursued with the vision that God's given him. And in my notes here, I wrote, I think what I admire about him is he sees the church for who the church is going to be, not just who they are now. And I think that's amazing, because all of us look at church, and we could all find things that aren't quite to our taste, or we think that should be done better. But the reality is that Jesus is coming back for a perfect bride.
Mm.
And I think one of the things about the way my dad sees the church is that's what he sees. It's not just what's present in front of him right now. So yeah, I think he's probably that person for me, along with many others.
Yeah, well, no, I'm sure there is, and it's interesting. It's a fascinating insight to how you see your dad and that vision that he
Mm,
has. I often think that that's how God sees us. He sees us
yeah.
as where we're going to be and what he's moving us towards, and he takes us from wherever we are, whatever we've done,
Mm,
and he takes us on a journey of life. And
yeah.
he doesn't look at you in the instances. He just sees you. He almost treats us as the end product already there. And your dad's very
Yeah.
similar, isn't he? Is that he sees the church of where it can be, and on the journey, it's being made beautiful. And obviously he leads well.
Yeah.
He
Absolutely.
is very inspiring. And to leave his role as he had, to come and do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it must, yeah, about 20 odd years ago, 25, 26 years ago, he must have done that. I first met him in a
Yeah.
hotel when he was giving my wife and I some marriage advice before we got married.
Oh, wow.
And so yes,
Funny.
he's cool. He's very cool. So I'm assuming that Manchester's your favourite place in the world, obviously. And if it's not, do you have a favourite place?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I mean, I liked it as a student. No, my three favorite places. Number one is New York City. Number 2 is Cape Town, and number 3 is New Zealand. So I've been to New York a few times. Amazing, love it. Amazing city. I love the architecture. I love the busyness. I find it quite an inspiring place, sort of creatively. Cape Town is stunning, absolutely stunning. Amazing food, beaches and mountains, just beautiful. And then New Zealand, that's where Kim, my wife's, a lot of her family are. So we've very fortunate to have been there a few times. And it's a very long way, very, very long way. It takes a long time to get there, but it's an amazing place. It really is.
I haven't travelled as much as you, Benj, so it's quite nice to see where other people have, where other people would go. I would say the Lake District or something, which is only a couple of hours away. But obviously, New Zealand would be one of those places that I would always want because it's obviously a bigger version of the Lake District.
It really is. It's amazing. Closely followed by Manchester, of course.
Well, of course, and we can't forget Leamington and Leicester, obviously, in all of that for the people that are listening.
Absolutely.
Do you have any favourite? Do you have any favourite pastimes, interests, Benj, outside of work and church, other than obviously kids, which take over your life?
Kids take over. I think I was thinking about this, and I wrote mooching. There's nothing I enjoy more
What's
than
mooching?
around. Do you know mooching?
I've heard
Mooching
the
is
word.
like,
Just tell me what you think it means.
yeah, like you go you go for a mooch. So we do that here a lot. So like we'll drive into town and we go for a mooch, which means like we walk around, grab a coffee, get something to eat in shops, go around the parks, just kind of like see where it takes you. And I quite like that. I like a mooch.
That's cool. And Leamington's beautiful for doing that, isn't it?
It is. But aside from that, running, playing guitar, music, photography, good food, all those things. Yeah.
Wow, very rounded, very rounded. Cool. Tell us a little bit about. You've given us a bit of a glimpse about your dad. Tell us a little bit about your mum or any other significant family members that you'd like to just tell us about.
Yeah. So quite an interesting family, I suppose. So dad was an accountant, and that's before he kind of left that and worked for church full time. And my mum was a teacher, so she's at primary school, I think, and she taught us for a little bit when we were smaller enough to be in her classes. And then she was full-time mum essentially for most of our sort of upbringings. She has an interesting family in that one of her sisters reads the news for the BBC. She has another sister who is a very, 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 very good solicitor for one of the largest companies on the planet. Her other sister's an artist. So yeah, there's quite a few sort of interesting vocations in the family, I think.
Brilliant.
One of my granddads was a shoe designer. So this is my dad's dad. So he used to travel the world photographing shoes in different countries, and then he would design them. And then my mum's dad was a printer. He had his own printing factory, and he used to print stuff for lots of local businesses. So it's not surprising that those sort of creative genes have made their way, I don't think.
No, exactly. Totally get that. And obviously you talk about music being part of what you enjoy. You got a favourite Christian song at all, Benj? And if so, what?
Well, I have loads of favourite Christian songs. I think part of when you lead worship a lot, you're forced, I think, to be aware of a lot of songs that are around and really getting to grips of like, well, which ones would be suitable for our church's context. And so, and I love worship, absolutely love it. So for me, trying to pick a favorite Christian song is really hard. So what I've done is I've picked one which meant a lot to me when I was at uni. When I went to Manchester, that was first time leaving home, being away from parents. I would say growing up in church, it was amazing, and I'm thankful for it. But I think because of who my parents were and just we've always been a part of the church, I think it was easy to kind of put on a bit of a front to kind of say, yeah, I know what to do. We're the Lions and we always do this things right. And I think when I went to Manchester, I was almost forced into a position of, do I actually believe all of this for myself, or is it just because it's what my mum and dad and everybody else told me? And if I do believe it for myself, nobody's going to make me pursue God anymore. It's all on me. And I remember having this moment of having to decide either I'm all in or I'm not. And thankfully, I chose to be all in. At the time, Jesus Culture, who was kind of, like a youth, youthy worship team from America. They were becoming a bit more well known, and they traveled over to Manchester and they had a worship night at the church that I was at. And there was a guy leading worship, a guy called Chris Kilala is his surname. And I remember watching him on YouTube, early days of YouTube, and seeing a video of him leading worship. And he was an okay singer. He wasn't amazing, but I remember as I was watching him, he was kind of the first example of somebody that I saw who led worship in a way that I was like, I want to be like that.
Mm.
And I had this amazing moment of being like, oh, almost like the possibility of leading worship became a thing for me. Like I'd just played guitar up until that point, but I saw him lead and I was like, yes, like that's something that I want to aspire to. And he led this song on that night in Manchester. It's called Hallelujah. It's such a simple song,
Mm.
takes words from Revelation about all of the angels crying out, holy is the Lord, and all the earth replies, holy is he. And yeah, it's a wonderful song. And every time I hear it, it takes me right back to that moment of being like, oh yes, God, if this is what you want, I'll happily lead people in worship, you know.
Wow, it's really, and thanks. We'll share the song later in the notes, but it's not a song that I've heard before, to be honest, Benj. I listened to it once you'd sent it through, and you're absolutely right. You can see why people get captured in worship. It's like I love music. Can't play an instrument.
Yeah.
Can't even sing properly. But you can see that God inspires through worship, through the musicians, through the singing, through the words. And yeah, having watched it and listened, I can absolutely understand why you would be inspired. And it does challenge your worship, doesn't it? To think more deeply and to say, as you've just said, is this real for me? Am I going to stand on my
Yeah,
own 2 feet? Am
absolutely.
I going to stand on my own 2 feet in my faith? Or am I going to slightly be passive? Or
Yeah.
am I going to just say that I am just because everybody else thinks I should be? So it's great that you had that
Yeah,
experience all those years ago.
it's right. And I think when I was there, it was probably the first time where I'd been in a room where there was a lot of young people who were really crying out for God,
Mm,
actually. It's kind of student meeting, and it was very free for people, like a time of worship. It wasn't super structured, it was very free. The Holy Spirit was really moving, and the words of that song, if you like, was the heart response of the people.
yeah.
And those sorts of moments I'd like to suggest are life changing, really.
Mm,
People that are listening to this who have had something similar, they'll know what I'm talking about. It's you're in a setting and it's just such an anointed time, I suppose, if I could phrase it that way. It does something deep in you that changes you. Yeah, for me, every time I hear this song, I'm taken right back there and in that moment of just being like, yes, I'll give you everything.
wow, that's brilliant, isn't it? I guess obviously uni and other things as you go through each stage of your life, God's directed you somehow. Can you give us just a bit of a glimpse of how God speaks to you and directs you? Because obviously all of us have been on a journey and bounced around. But how does God speak to you specifically, and how has He directed you over the years?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd caveat this by saying I love hearing how God speaks to different people, because the reason I like it is because it's always a little bit different, and I think that's on purpose because He created all of us uniquely, and He will speak to you probably slightly different than He would speak to me because you and I are different, and He knows how we need to hear Him so that we can hear Him, I think. So for me, I feel I hear him a lot in worship, and I think that probably is the case for a lot of people, and that makes sense because we're all created to worship him, and why wouldn't he choose to speak when we're in that
Mm,
place of worshiping and surrendering to him? So he speaks to me a lot in worship. I find that when he speaks to me, a lot of the time it tends to be in like pictures. So he'll give me like a picture of something which is, in my mind I'll be imagining something happening, or a picture of something, and I'll say, "What are you saying, God?" And then he'll tell me what he's saying. Often that's for other people. He tends to use me a lot bringing words of knowledge to people. The first time this happened for me was when I was 14 or 15, and we'd just had Arna Skargan with the youth. It was a Friday night, and Arna was with us, and he was sharing all about words of knowledge. And I was listening to him, and I was so, again, inspired and captured by what he was
Mm.
saying about how God, in the person of the Holy Spirit, would show us things and tell us things about somebody else because he loves them and he wants them to find him. And I thought, that's amazing. And I went home and I prayed and I said, God, I would love to start moving in that gift. And the next day I was at work at a garden centre, and I was in the car park of this garden centre, and I prayed that prayer. I said, God, would you speak to me? And I looked up and there was a lady walking towards me, a customer. And immediately God said to me all of these things about her. She had pain in her knee. She had done it on a skiing accident, and he told me her name as well. And I had a split second of thinking, wow, this is either God or I'm making it up. But I chose to trust that it was God. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that if you ask God to talk to you, he will. And it's easy for us to second guess it and assume we're making things up. But I would rather assume it's him and find out afterwards.
Mm.
So anyway, so this lady walks towards me, and I said, excuse me, I don't suppose your name is so and so. And she said, yes, that's my name. I said, oh wow, have you hurt your knee in a skiing accident? Said, yes, I've just come back from a skiing holiday and I've damaged my knee and it's really hurting. And I said, oh well, I'm a Christian. God's just told me this thing and I'd love to pray for you. So I prayed for her in the car park and then never saw her again. And I was only 15 or something, 14 or 15. And then I found out years later that there was a young, I think it was a young girl who came along to youth at church. And she said, I've come here because my grandma brought me. And she's brought me because all these years ago, a boy came up to her and prayed for her. And I believe this is how it went. She gave her life to Jesus and she wanted to find a youth group for her granddaughter to go to.
No
And that's how
way.
she ended up at church. Yeah.
That
But
is
I never saw
crazy.
her again. So I had no idea what happened. But that was probably the first of many times where the Holy Spirit just give me words of knowledge or show me things about other people, which I think is like the coolest thing. Like how awesome that God of the whole universe would want to do things like that with us.
Yeah, exactly. What I love about what you're
So
saying
yeah,
there,
I think
Benj, it's brilliant because you simplified that down into you said what are you saying to me about at the moment? What are you saying
mm,
about this situation or this person? You just ask a simple question of God, and just and so often we don't even ask. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? We don't ask the simple question, and that may be because we're scared, we're fearful that we might look stupid, that he actually might answer, and actually, and as you indicated, is if he does answer, we might have to do something with it, which in that
yeah,
circumstance that you've just given is incredibly challenging, and we have to step out in faith.
yeah.
So, yeah,
But
really powerful.
I tell you one other story, but you're right. Here's the thing: God is a speaking God. We know that about him. That's his nature, and we know that he wants to speak to us. And we also know he wants to use us for his mission. And so all it comes down to is us choosing to say yes. That's it. It's not about our ability to be a really good Christian, or we have to have like prayed this amount of prayers or read these amount of scriptures. It's not that.
Mm.
It's just, are we willing to do what he says? And that's pretty much always what, at least for me in my life, it always comes down to that. It's God says this to me. Am I going to say yes to him? And that's it. So there was another occasion where we were buying our first house, which I won't tell that story, but in and of itself was a miracle how we got the house. But we were buying this house and it was a new build house. And we had our appointment to go and choose our tiles and carpets and all that. So we were sat in this office with this lady, and I can't remember how it came up, but she ended up telling us that her and her husband had one more attempt at IVF to have a child. And we didn't know her at all. And we'd only gone in to choose tiles, but she just told us this thing. Now, in that situation, you could say, well, that was nice for her to say so. And, you say, oh, well, all the best. I really hope it goes okay. Or you could let the Holy Spirit do a little bing light bulb in your head, like, oh, hang on a minute, something's going on. So in that situation, we said, oh, well, we'll pray for you. So we prayed with her in that little room in the office, and we are just like, God, you love this lady. I forget what her name was. Thank you that you love her. You want her to have children, and we pray that this round of IVF works. And that was it. Super simple, nothing complicated, no weird Christian language that people don't understand unless they're a Christian. None of that. But you said, we'll pray for you. And again, we never saw her again. However, 9 months later, we were walking through Foss Park, which is near us, and we were walking along, and somebody was walking the other way, and they bumped my shoulder, and I didn't see it. I turned around, I was like, I'm so sorry. And this person turned around, and it was this lady, and she had a brand new baby
No
hugged to
way.
her chest in one of those baby carriers. And I was like, oh, it's you. And she didn't quite pick it up, and she carried on. But it was literally, we worked out afterwards, it was pretty much 9 months later
No
that we
way.
saw her. I was like, wow, God's so good, and I don't know what happens to her after that, but I just think the way that I want to live my life is very much one of believing that if I ask him to speak, he'll speak.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, that I only have one job to do, and that's to say yes and do it. And that means getting over myself a little bit. It means being okay with getting things wrong. And that takes a bit of practice and getting used to. But I found that the more you do that, the more exciting life is,
Mm.
and the more you see him move in your life and in other people's lives. And really, for me, like, that's the way to live. I'd much rather have a life where I see God doing amazing things than sitting and enjoying church, but never really experiencing that stuff.
Yeah. Wow. That's brilliant. Do you think that God, would you say, I know that's a gift of God. Do you think that God's gifting you in other ways? And if so, how? And where do you see that sort of like going in the future?
Yeah, I don't know whether other people find this, but sometimes I find it a little bit hard to look introspectively and to think, where has he gifted me, or sometimes I just have to ask other people because I think it's easier to see things in others sometimes than yourself. But I believe he's given me the ability to lead people, one in worship, but also just generally. I mean, um, there's nothing like planting a church and leading it that forces you to be a good leader. But I think he's gifted me in leading people. And I think what I've noticed and what other people have commented on is the ability to really understand what the Holy Spirit is saying and doing when the church is gathered together, and then kind of knowing how to respond and how to work with that. So again, I said earlier about I find I'm able to hear him very clearly when we worship, kind of beyond that. And I found this in oh, no, thumbs up. I found this in the way that I um, lead worship is very much. I feel he's quite good at showing me what he's doing in different people and knowing how to follow him, I guess, in that. So I
Is
don't know how you describe that, but
is that in a similar way to you getting your pictures, or is it more of an inner sense? How are you? I sort of get it because I lead people myself, and I've led a number of teams. Interestingly, I was just watching a Jurgen Klopp podcast just earlier today about how he led Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund and others, and he was struggling to sort of like describe what was a natural ability is of I pull people together and I give them a sense of purpose, and
mm,
I sense where we're going off track, or and I'm very similar. And if someone was to ask me how, I just be me, and I listen to God, and I try and do what I think is the right thing. Have you worked it
mm.
out yet, Benj?
Have I worked it out? I would say I feel I know his voice to me. And that has come from many years of learning to hear him and getting things wrong, but also getting things right. And I'd say it probably started where, if we put it in the worship context, going from leading people in a few songs to the first time where he said to me, "Leave some space now because I want to do something." And so then I'm like, okay. And if you're the worship leader, you can do that because you say to everybody, let's just wait here. leave some space. Normally everybody gets uncomfortable because nobody likes to not know what they're doing and where they're going. But often in those moments, that's when God really speaks and really does something. And so it's probably going from there and then going to leading a song and then just getting that sudden prompting from him, like that line that we just sang, that's what I want to do. And then being like, okay, well, what should I do about that? And then him saying, well, you need to read it to people. You need to tell them what it means. You need to encourage them in it and see this thing. And, it kind of over the years sort of building to a point where
Mm.
I feel now like I'm able to take however long I'm given and say to God beforehand, what do you want to do today? Or what do you want to do in this time? And then be like, okay, let's take people there. But on the way, my ears are open to what he's saying and what he's doing all the time. I remember hearing a preach from Bill Johnson, Bethel guy, and he was talking about recognizing God's presence and recognizing when he's in the room and about to do something. And he gave this analogy of a pointer dog. I think pointer is the breed. And a pointer dog will charge across a field, amazing sense of smell. They'll be running, 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 and then all of a sudden they'll stop and then they'll point their nose to wherever the animal is, I suppose, or whatever they're trying to find. And it was amazing. Like we're going this way, we're going this way, and then all of a sudden stop, point to something, and wait, and then they go that way. And he described that as being what it's like when we come together as the church, and we come together and off we go, and we're going in this direction. But there's a moment where we pause and we sense God's doing something, or if you like, the King's in the room now, and now we need to look at him, and we need to go that way. And I found that super helpful. And so that is probably describes a little bit of what
Yeah.
I'm trying to articulate.
No, that is really good. And obviously, I've seen you lead worship over the years, from when you first started to where you are now. And I've not seen you for a number of years because you've been in the Market Harbour congregation. And I know in recent times, when you've come back and played at Central, when we've had a bit more of a get together, you are totally gifted. And the distance travelled from when you first started is quite remarkable. What we often forget, though, is that you have to take the first step, and we
Yeah,
don't have to be the finished article at the start. We just have to be
that's
willing to
right.
take the step and to go, I'm willing to step up and lead, and I'm willing to step up
Mm,
and hear, and I'm willing to whatever it is that God's calling us to. And I look back now and I think, wow, look where you are now. And I gained a lot then. But when I see the journey that I've seen you on over the years, God is clearly using you, and you've clearly heard the voice of God a lot, to see how
mm,
sensitive he can be towards you and towards everybody else. Be encouraged.
mm.
You can't always see your own journey in these things.
Thank you.
No,
Okay.
it's fine. Ben, tell me a favourite passage or something. Do you have one? And if so,
Yeah,
why that particular passage?
yeah. I think that again, there's loads I could choose, but the one that always comes to mind is Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7, which I think many people will be familiar with. It's don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for what he's done, and then you will experience peace beyond understanding, essentially. I love that verse because it's really practical and it's addressing something which everybody faces. Everybody has a time when they're worried or they're anxious and they don't know what to do. If you like, this verse is a bit of a key to how you battle that for me. So he doesn't say to not tell him what you're worried about. He says, no, tell me. But then he says, tell me what you need and thank me for what I've done. Tell God what you need and thank him for what he's done. And I read that as thank him for what he's done in your life already, but also thank him for what he's done future tense. And if you like, it's a declaration. Let's say you're worried that you're not going to have enough money this month. Well, the way you can do that is like, Lord, I'm really worried. I'm not sure how we're going to make ends meet this month. The figures are just not adding up, but thank you that you've always provided for me. And thank you that this month we will have everything that we need. And that is like that heart attitude of thankfulness. It's amazing how much thankfulness will really bring peace and joy to your life. I think there's something in that which probably we all need to experience more and more, unlock more. have a greater revelation on. But that place of thankfulness for what he has done and for what he has done, but you've not seen it yet.
Yeah, very good.
I think for me, it's like been a real key.
I love that. It's one of those passages that I have a little quip for it. If you're in a fix, Philippians 4:6. And I think in today's, there's a lot of people very anxious with the news, with life situations, financial relationships, lack of hope, lack of purpose. There's a lot of people very anxious. And it's a great passage to come back to. So I'm going to read it again. Do not be anxious about
Great.
anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ.
That's it.
And for anyone that's listening, if you're anxious about anything at this moment, just present your request to God and know that He hears. And we've heard from Benj already that He speaks. And let Him just guard your heart and bring peace into your situation at this time. So if you're in a fix, Philippians 4:6. And on that, Benj, tell us, and this may be a passage that you can relate to this next bit, it may not, but tell us, if you've been in any dark valleys or deep valleys at any point, what lessons did you learn and how did God and Jesus help you in those times?
Yeah,
Because we all find ourselves in those, don't we? But I'm always interested to know,
we do.
is He really there and how does He help us come through?
Yeah, I chuckle at this question because my answer was I'm in my biggest valley moment right now. So yeah, there you are. It's a podcast exclusives. No, so I would say, do you know what made me laugh is, you know, when you get married, often people will say to you, they'll give you all this great advice, and they'll say things like, well, you know, the tough times will come. You will come up against things as a married couple, and when you're young and when you're newly married, you're like, yeah, you know, I'm sure that's the case. And then when you get older and you've been married longer, you realize, like, well, yes, of course that is true. So I'd say the last 2 years have been the hardest 2 years of my life, genuinely, for so many different reasons. We've lost family members. We've had a lot of challenges with children. We've had our house flooded at the start of this year, and we've only lived in it for 6 weeks. This is just after we moved to Leamington. So that was a huge disruption to our life. We've had really difficult health challenges with our youngest kids since the summer. We've been in and out of hospital every couple of weeks since then. A couple of moments when we thought he's potentially not going to make it, you know, like really serious. And in one sense, it's felt a bit like walking through mud. You know, we're still walking, but it's really hard work. And interestingly, it's kind of coincided with us saying yes to God to planting the church in Leamington. So I believe there's something spiritual in that, in a bit of opposition to what we're doing. But yes, it's been a hard 2 years, and it's been just one thing after another, and lots of things that I've not mentioned. But in it all, I have known that peace that we just talked about, which is interesting. And I have deliberately tried as much as I can to be thankful as much as I can. And it's not all been bad either. Like, there's been lots of amazing things, and what God is doing in Leamington is really exciting, and we're being stretched and used in lots of ways that we haven't been before now. But yeah, it's been hard going, and I think, you know, I think everybody goes through difficult times, but when you're in those difficult times, the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, and we've been determined to not let the difficulties and the distractions or disruptions stop what we're here to do, if I could put it that way. So we've had to make quite a conscious choice in that. We're tired, you know, and there's no question about that. However, I would say I feel like I feel like God's almost he's sort of carrying us through it, and it's still hard, but He's got us. I know that we've got peace, we've got joy, still. Yeah, it's been an interesting.
Do you find that God speaks more in these times, or does He bring more people around you? It's like you talked about Him holding you in His hands and all of that.
Mm.
But is there anything practical way, you think, well, God's absolutely said something or done something or laid someone there, or has there been signs that you know that you're in his hands, even though despite all the circumstances, where you're just going, yeah, I've just been reassured because of whatever. Is there any of those? Is there anything in there that we can just see Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I think the peace that I feel, or the peace that we feel, is one of those signs. I think if you were to look at it naturally, everything that's happened, you would think, "Oh my goodness, how are you still standing? How have you not had a breakdown and not super stressed and all of that?" So I do think genuinely, like, just that sense of peace is one of those things. I'd say there's been a few times where I feel I've heard him very clearly say something of what he's doing, or just reassuring me. That's been good. Like, on the one hand, it can be hard to hear him when there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think that's probably, if you were to believe something spiritual is going on, the enemy would love it for us to stop listening to him,
Mm,
and to stop following him and stop doing what he says. So if he can put things in place that stop us from using our ears, he will do. And so on the one hand, I kind of feel like, I've probably not been hearing him as much as normal, but it's not because he's not speaking. It's just there's been things going on, and
yeah.
and they've potentially distracted. But on the other hand, when I have really gone to him and be like, God, what's going on? I have heard him really clearly. So, and then I think, and then also I look at what he's done practically where we are and in people and in the church, and there's little moments where I see something that God has done. I'm like, yeah, you're still here. You're really good still. He's always good, but there's things where you see it and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good thing he's done,
Mm,
and you can then use that to fuel that thankfulness that brings the peace.
yeah.
Um,
No, that's really good. And obviously, as you're getting quite old now at 35, I'm sure God's developed and changed your thinking, your life, your behaviours over the years. And obviously, when I'm listening to you there, and you do seem calm in the storm, but have you seen any specific areas where God's changed you over the years? I always find it, and I often look at myself and think, I haven't really changed a lot since I was whatever in my teens, and some would probably argue that I haven't changed a lot. I'm sure there is. Is there any areas that you think that God's really worked on you, or is working on you in those areas at the moment?
I think as I get older, I think I'm becoming more aware of my strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's something that God's sort of prompting me to look at the minute, particularly areas of character where I think actually there's some things which need to be dealt with, not like and there's loads of wrong stuff in there, but dealt with in a sense of, no, 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 come on, that thing that you think about yourself, that's not right. That's not who I say you are. And I think when I was growing up, I was very much, I really wanted people to like me. I still do a bit, but when I was growing up, I hated being different. I hated the thought that anybody wouldn't want to be my friend, and that led me to make decisions and do things that I probably didn't really want to do, but I was only doing it because I just wanted to be liked and to fit in. But I think that has produced in me a bit of a self doubt sometimes. I'm not quite sure who I fully am,
Mm,
and also a bit of a lack of confidence in who I am as well. And those are things that I think more recently God is kind of churning up and wanting to speak into. So that's probably one thing. And I think having children changes you a lot and makes you realize, like for me, I never would have described myself as selfish. And then children come along and I'm met with this thing of like, oh gosh, I can't just do what I want anymore. And that's uncomfortable. So, but then I think like all the lessons you learn through having kids then tells you something about God and who he is as a father to us. And how many times have I been selfish and not spent time with him, or like those are things like that which I feel I'm learning as I get older.
no, really good
But
that you've
I
changed.
interestingly, I wrote, there's one thing that I wrote first which hasn't changed, which I know is not the question, but I thought I'd say it anyway, and that is that when I was younger, probably again 15-ish. I was in a big youth gathering, and a guy was speaking, and he was talking about Jesus coming back, and he said, if we are to believe that Jesus will come back when everybody has had the chance to hear the gospel and respond to him, either yes or no, if that was the case, and then he did some simple maths. He said, if every person in this room just reached one person this year and saw them saved, and then that happened again next year, and that grew over time, he said it would only take 35 years for Jesus to come back.
Wow.
And I was 15 at the time, so that would take me to 50. And I'm 35 now. And ever since that day, I've lived believing that I will see Jesus come back before I die. And that vision has only grown and got stronger.
Mhm.
And I still believe it 100% to the very core of who I am. I believe that I will see Jesus come back before I die. And that has been something that's driven me and kept me going for the last 20 years. And I'm sure for the next 15.
Brilliant.
But I look at what's going on in the world. Lots of people worried. I'm not worried because, first of all, I know who God is, but also because I know that Jesus is coming back and it's all in his hands and it's okay.
Yeah.
I look at what's going on at the moment with lots of young people coming to faith and being open to the gospel more. And I just think it's all just little things that are happening that are all on the way to Jesus returning. Yeah. So for me, that's one thing that's not changed. If anything, it's just got deeper and deeper and deeper
Yeah. That's
into
really
me.
powerful. Yeah, and I do think that God
Yeah.
speaks to us all the time, and there are some things that are spoken into us that just stick.
Hmm.
I had a very similar thing from a youth leader that spoke into me when I was in my teens, and I didn't know what it meant at the time, and I am now 50, and it's been something that's stuck with me throughout, and it's amazing how you see your journey in life starting to bring to fruition what God speaks, because His Word says when He speaks, it doesn't come back without bearing fruit.
That's right.
Exciting. What's intriguing me is you obviously read the Word a lot and pray and stuff, but you probably chat to lots of people, but do you read books? And if so, is there any books that you could tell us that you've read or would recommend?
So I'm not a big reader, really not. I kind of stopped being interested in reading when the Harry Potter books went from being this big to this big, which was a long time ago. So I have to discipline myself to read, which I find easier at sometimes and difficult at other times. But there are two books which I can highly recommend, two books that I've read, which I have just here. So they're both easy reads, which is good for me. The first one is this one. So this is a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's by a guy called John Mark Comer. I actually read this. Kim and I both read this book at the start of the pandemic. I think that's just about when it came out. And it's all about, as the name suggests, how to live a life that's not hurried and how to slow down and to be a bit more attentive to what God is doing. And often when we hurry through life, we miss a lot of that. It's super practical. It's been great at teaching on things like Sabbath and rest and silence. Lots of people don't like silence, but
Mm.
actually God can do a lot of things when we're just silent before him. And so that's a really great book, super easy to read, really challenging, but really good. And then this is the other one. So this book is called The Reset, and it's by a guy called Jeremy Riddle, who's a worship leader over in America, returning to the heart of worship and a life of undivided devotion. And it's essentially a book that's kind of written to challenge a lot of what modern worship has become. And it's kind of a callback to the real heart of what worship is. Very, very challenging thinking about when we gather as a church, what are we there to do? Who is the worship for? It's not for us, it's for God. And therefore, for us to say, well, I didn't really like this song, or I didn't like the way we did that thing, that's totally that's not what it's all about. It's about us bringing something to him. So it's very much like a kind of just getting back to the roots of what it is that we do together when we're worshiping. And the guy that writes it is a very passionate man. and it comes across in his
Yeah.
writing.
Is that Matt Redmond?
I think he said that.
Is it Matt Red? Not in
Not
that
Matt
book.
Redmond. So
Who wrote the actual? Do you remember the song "Heart of Worship"?
yes, that is
I
Matt
think it's Matt
Redmond, I think.
Redmond. Now,
Yeah.
interestingly, Benj, you'll like this connection. We were in church in the Lake District on Sunday, and that song came up. Coming back to the
Oh,
heart of
interesting.
worship, it's all about you. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've
Things,
made it.
and it's such a
Yeah.
beautiful song, and I've listened to it probably 5 times since Sunday. And I haven't thought about that song for probably 15 years or however long. It's
Mm,
uncanny that that book is about that, because I was in the worship in the Lake District thinking exactly that, is that we miss the point sometimes.
mm, hmm.
We need to really come
Yeah.
back and remember that it's not about us, it's all about him. And
Yeah.
yeah, an absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful,
Absolutely.
beautiful song, and obviously a great book as well. So brilliant. Benj, our time's getting close to an end, but I've got a couple more simple questions, as they all are, as you know. If you had 3 minutes with either Jesus or a non-Christian, choose whichever, what would you talk about? I'll let you decide who you want to talk to for 3 minutes.
So I've said if I had 3 minutes of Jesus, I think I'd spend the first 2 minutes just looking at him and being close to him, not saying anything. I think I would just want to take it all in.
Yeah, good.
And then I've saved myself 1 minute to ask him if I could have a glimpse of what heaven is like. I would love to hear the sound of all of creation and all of the angels worshipping. Like whatever that sounds like blows my mind, but I would love to hear it. So I don't know. I think I maybe wouldn't talk very much. I think I just want to be with him.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you
No, that's cool.
go.
If you could leave a legacy in life, what would it be?
Well, I think for me, where it says in the word that Jesus only did what he saw his father doing, that is, I can think of no better legacy, really. Like, if I died, I don't think this will happen, but if I died before Jesus came back, what a great thing to put on a gravestone or a tombstone, you know, he did what he saw his father doing. Or something like he always said yes to God, you know. Like those for me is that's I can't really think of anything better than that, to be honest.
Really powerful. Really, only do what you see the Father doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really powerful. I remember Nick Favell, the late Nick Favell. That's all he used to say. I just want to listen to Jesus and see what the Father's doing and do what he's asked and do what he says and do what he does. And you think, wow,
Hmm.
what a powerful testimony. Benj, look, we're pretty much there. But is there any last words of encouragement that you might give to others that might want to hear from God, might be looking to about their gifts or passions? Have a couple of minutes just to say what you need to say, if of a word of encouragement to others.
Leave it all out there. Yeah, look, I think kind of as we said earlier, I think the best thing you can do is to just say yes to him. Just if he tells you to do something, if he nudges you, if you feel you hear him talk to you, just do it. There's nothing better than just saying yes to him and just doing what he says. And it's the most exciting thing ever. As I said earlier, that for me, that's what life's all about, you know. But I'd say specifically around, I think the question is about like how you can use your gifts and your passions for God and to serve Him in that way. I think be a servant. That's the first thing. Always do things as a servant. Never for self promotion. It's not about putting any of us on a stage to say, look how great we are. You know, it's not about that at all. It's all about him. So approach it as a servant. Look to Jesus for the best example of what a servant is like. Try loads of things, you know, try and just get stuck in with loads of stuff. And then I've said for me, like the most amazing thing is if you imagine like a Venn diagram where you've got your two circles that overlap, one circle is something that brings me joy, and then the other circle is something that is doing something for God's kingdom. When those two things overlap, that middle intersection, that's the thing.
Mhm.
So if there's something where let's say the thing that really brings me joy is playing my guitar and singing it and worshiping, and then what God is saying is like, I want you to use that gift to lead people. Like that's the intersection, and that thing there is for me like that's what it's all about. So if you're really into the outdoors and exploring and adventure and climbing mountains and doing all of that, and God says, well, I'd love to use you to disciple people. Why not put those together and have that intersection of the Venn diagram is, well, I'm going to take people away for a weekend. We're going to have an adventure and we're going to disciple people on the mountain. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how I
Yeah,
thought about it. Those two
brilliant.
circles of
Really
what
great
brings
picture.
me joy, but and also what brings God joy and what does he want? And if you can overlap them, then I think that's a great thing to give your time to. Maybe that's the thing that he's calling you to do.
Yeah, Benj, that's really, really powerful. Look, we want to thank you for your time today, Benj. Really
No
insightful,
problem.
really inspiring. Um, so thank you. I hope everyone has enjoyed today's episode and been as inspired as I have. What we know that in 2 Timothy 1, Paul urges Timothy to fan into flame the gift of God within us. For God's not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. So why don't you intentionally fan into flame the gift of God that's inside of you? Why don't you look to the left or look to the right and encourage somebody else with their gifts? Maybe help them discover their gifts, encourage them in their gifts. Look, God's got an eternal purpose that he wants to use us for. So get stuck in. As Ben just said, just ask the simple question, what are you saying in this situation? Take the first step and see where God takes you. Look, Benj, you've been an inspiration. Thanks for everything that you've done. Everybody else would be blessed
No
and have a
problem.
blessed week. Goodbye, and we'll see you soon.
See you.